Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm K.S. Narayan. I welcome you all on behalf of IT Alumni Center, Bengaluru, for the 45th webinar. We have been conducting these webinars online since April 2020. It's been a successful series, and in case you have missed some of these lectures, you can find our previous webinars on YouTube. Today, we have the opportunity to hear Professor Sunita Sarvagi from the Computer Science and Engineering Department at IIT Bombay on machine learning as a service, the challenges of serving diverse client distributions. Professor Sunita Sarvagi is a renowned expert in the field of machine learning, databases, data mining, and graphical models as applied to domains like web information extraction, data integration, social networking. She heads the Center for Machine Intelligence and Data Science at IIT Bombay. She got her early undergraduate degree from IIT Kharagpur and then went on to obtain her PhD from University of California at Berkeley. She has also worked at IBM Almaden and Carnegie Mellon and also at Google Research. She was awarded the prestigious Infosys Prize in 2019 for engineering and computer science. The prize specifically recognized her pioneering work in developing information extraction techniques for unstructured data. She is also the recipient of Distinguished Alumnus Award from IIT Kharagpur, the IBM Faculty Award, and she is also the Fellow of Indian National Academy of Engineering. Professor Sarvagi is a prolific researcher with an impressive Google Scholar matrix. Her papers have won awards at ACM, SIGMOD, VLDB, ICDN, ICDBM, NIPS, ICML conferences. She has served on the board of directors of ACM, SIG KDD, and VLDB Foundation. She has been a program chair and program committee member for many of these conferences and is also on the editorial board of ACM TOTS and ACM TKDD journals. Moderating the seminar today is Dr. Vishwajit Kumar. Dr. Vishwajit is a researcher in speech and language group at IBM Research India. He has a joint degree in computer science, joint PhD degree in computer science and engineering from IIT Bombay and Monash University, Australia. He works on very interesting novel research problems in the areas of natural language processing and machine learning, with a current focus on question answering, question generation, ontologies, and knowledge graphs, and also code mixed NLP. So for today's webinar, I really encourage the audience, the participants to engage in a discussion via the Q&A box. Okay? So please note down the question in that box, not the chat box. Okay. Looking forward to this very interesting webinar. Over to you, Professor Sarvagi.
Thank you, Professor Narayan. Thanks very much, Dr. Sushila and Professor Narayan, for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be giving this talk, and I hope you'll get something from it. I'll just share my screen now. Yeah, can you see my screen all right? So let me get started. Just 1 second. Yeah. So today I'll be talking about the exciting research challenges in this emerging area where machine learning models are used as services on the cloud rather than a model that you train and deploy in-house. So the core of machine learning is classification, where given an input X, which can take many different forms, you need to output a label, which is just a single discrete variable with a finite domain. The classifier or the model is learned from several correct input-output pairs, XY pairs. Now, this very simply stated operator has an amazing number of applications. For example, when the input is an image, you can use classifiers to get computers to see. And this has applications in surveillance. For example, in IIT Bombay, it's very handy to be able to tell apart panthers from black dogs using, say, appropriately smart CCTV camera. Similarly, in health diagnostics, you can use a classifier to tell apart normal images of retina from diabetic images. When the input is a text, then you can get machines to read and make sense of natural language. For example, you can use this capability to route short text. Suppose if you have a complaint management system, you can use it to route a text to the correct page. And there are thousands of other real-world applications in forecasting, recommendations, advertisement, sciences, so on and so forth. Now, building a classifier that can handle such diversity of data and generalize well to be useful beyond the training data is highly challenging. More than 70 years of research has gone into making slow, steady progress to building ever-increasing quality of classifiers. Many approaches have been developed, including perceptrons, decision trees, neural networks, knife-based classifiers. Each of these has gone through its boom and bust cycles. But one basic template that has served well over the years is this very simple approach, where you take as input that X, which can be, as I said earlier, just about anything, and you use human ingenuity to design domain-specific features which convert that X into a fixed dimensional set of useful features. And thereafter, you train a machine learning model which assigns weights to each of these input features, and it uses a thresholding to decide on the correct label Y. Now, even though this looks like a very simple operation, this has been widely used just like 10 years back, because it gave rise to a convex training objective. The training was reliable, it was trivially scalable. And if you were not happy with the accuracy, you could try a few other things like boosting and bagging. And there were many sort of serious applications in banking, in retail, where such classifiers were used. And in all such cases, the models themselves were fairly lightweight. The data on which they were trained was limited, so that training and deployment was within the confines of one organization. Now, all this while neural networks had been around. I mean, neural networks are not a new technology, but they were considered too hard to train, too unstable, too slow. But that was the case only until 2010. Around 2011, a bunch of factors came together, including the availability of non-trivial amounts of training data, lot of computing, and then a few smarts both on the mathematics of optimizing classification functions and engineering to make the neural networks themselves somewhat easier to train in, for example, converting the activation unit from sigmoid functions to ReLU functions. And this combination of these forces suddenly brought about record-breaking accuracy using neural networks in some classically difficult tasks. One such task which was conquered, one of the first such tasks to be conquered, was object classification, where given an image, you need to identify the object which is there in the image. There was a data set called ImageNet, which was used for sort of benchmarking progress in classification algorithms. And before 2011, most of the methods were based on conventional classifiers like support vector machines. On the y-axis here, I'm showing error rate. On the x-axis, you have year. And around 2012 was the first entry of a deep learning-based method. And every subsequent year, the deep learning models were successively improved until 2015, when the first deep learning models surpassed human accuracy based on some crude estimate. And this is sort of the start of the boom of deep learning. Another sort of very useful and difficult task conquered by deep learning was speech recognition. And on the y-axis here, you see word error rate. On the x-axis, you see years. And again, from 2012 down up to 2017, you see a successive reduction in word error rate with better and better machine learning, deep learning training methodologies. Again, at some point, there was, again, some crude estimate which showed that the speech recognition achieved by a neural model was better than what you could get through a human being. Even tasks as esoteric as grammar error correction are now being handled with deep learning. So you can take a grammatically incorrect sentence and have a deep learning model correct it. And in 2019, there have been some research papers which claim that they have surpassed human level performance on such tasks. So what changed with deep learning? So this curve, some of you might have seen such curves before. It's a very popular curve now. So here on the x-axis, you have amount of data, and on the y-axis, you have performance or accuracy. And with deep learning, because they have huge modeling capacity, they respond to more and more data. So if you pump more data, you are rewarded with higher accuracy. Whereas traditional machine learning models, for example, the linear classifier based on human designed domain features that I first presented, plateaued because the model capacity was the bottleneck. So because of this phenomenon where more data, larger model gave rise to increased accuracy, you had on the one hand, record-breaking accuracy, even surpassing human accuracy on many difficult tasks. But on the other hand, training machine learning models became very resource intensive. So for example, some of the top line speech recognition models use as much as 50,000 hours of labeled data and a huge amount of compute. They might be training like for multiple days on hundreds of GPUs or TPUs, and they output models which are huge in terms of the number of parameters and the memory required to store and process them. For example, GPT-3, which is like the latest sensation, has 175 billion parameters. Now, such scale of resources, thankfully, are available only to a few resource-rich organizations of the world. But another good trend which has happened is that these models are now available as services, as network services for people to use. So now this has, for most of the challenging ML tasks, there are now ML cloud services offered by a few large organizations like Amazon and Google and Microsoft and IBM. So this brings us to the age of machine learning services, where companies with their huge amount of proprietary training data train a model. We are going to use this theta to denote a model. And they then make the model available on the cloud via APIs. And the clients can be quite diverse. And all that the clients are allowed to do is to feed their input instance and get back a prediction, sometimes with a confidence value. Now, the clients themselves can be very diverse. So, for example, an ASR model could be used, say, by a coffee shop in UK or a retail store in India or a health center in Australia. So now this brings us to the main theme of today's talk. So here we want to kind of talk about what are the machine learning research challenges which come about when one organization trains a model and the trained model is used by many different clients, each possibly drawing samples from its own unique data distribution. We have 70 years of machine learning research optimized for the classical setting where training and test distributions match. And if they don't, you could detect that there is a mismatch because the training data in the past was available to you, not anymore. So you cannot even detect when a client's distribution on which you are about to deploy a model matches the training distribution, which was required for machine learning models to provide generalizability guarantees. And if and when a drift was detected, earlier a standard way to adapt to the drift was to use some more labeled data to update or fine-tune the model parameters. Even this option is unavailable right now because the model parameters are hidden behind a black box. They are hidden behind the cloud, and clients do not have access to the model parameters. So because of these changes in the deployment and the training scenario, we need to rethink how standard machine learning pipelines for training, evaluations, and adaptation are performed. And this brings me to the outline of today's talk. I am going to talk about 3 standard machine learning operations: training, adaptation to a target distribution, and evaluation. And for each of these 3 operations, we will consider how the classical ML way of doing things differs from how we would want to do it in the cloud setting. So first, let's talk about training. So in classical machine learning, we assumed that our training data were IID samples from some latent distribution. And the main challenge in designing a sound training procedure was to generalize to samples from the same distribution. But in the cloud ML setting, it makes more sense to think of the training data as a mixture of several distributions. And we need to generalize not just to more examples from the distributions or the mixture components that are seen during training, but also to new components, new distributions, which we have like new clients, which we would not have seen during training. So this gives rise to a new area of machine learning, which is called domain generalization, in which now there is a lot of recent work. Next, let's talk about adaptation. So as I was mentioning earlier, if you had, say, if your deployment distribution has drifted for whatever reason, earlier you could just collect some more label data from your drifted distribution and fine-tune your model parameters to adapt to the new setup. But in the cloud ML setting, since the model is hidden, and also we do not assume that the server would want to do adaptation for each and every of its clients, because the number of clients also can be very large. So what you would want to do in many cases is sort of client-side adaptation. And so now this gives rise to an interesting problem of how do you take a black box model whose parameters you cannot observe and adapt it on the client side using a limited amount of label data that you might have for the client distribution. Even the sort of very modest task of evaluating a machine learning model becomes challenging. So even in my first few slides, I was talking about classifiers performance in terms of, say, their error rate. And I was just presenting a single error rate for a classifier. But when we talk about reporting the goodness or the performance of a trained ML service, which could be used by many diverse kind of clients, you cannot just report a single accuracy number. What we sort of make a case for is that for ML services, the accuracy should be reported as a surface over client data characteristics. So in the remaining part of my talk, I will be going over details of each of these 3 new machine learning research problems of domain generalization, black box adaptation, and reporting accuracy surface over a trained model. So first, let's talk about domain generalization. So, we are again in this service setting where you have the server which has been training its model on huge amounts of label data. But since we're interested in domain generalization, we will think that the data, so if L denotes the available labeled training data to a server, the right way to think of this training data is actually a mixture of several distributions. So let's think of the distributions, just think of them as colors. So here I'm showing like 3 different colors for 3 different distributions, which might be kind of comprising the whole training data distribution at the server side. So now, classically we think of training data as consisting of an input X and a label Y, but now we will also assume that every instance comes associated with the distribution ID D from which that example has been taken. So your training data basically comprises of groups of examples. Now, when you deploy, of course, the clients will not give you a client ID or a domain ID when they deploy the service, because the space of clients is open-ended. So it does not even make sense to come up with a notion of a client ID. So consider an example, like a very concrete example where you want to achieve such domain generalization. So again, let's go look at automatic speech recognition as a task at hand. Let us assume that the country of the speaker defines a domain or a group. And we want the ASR model, and the ASR model might be trained on speakers who are predominantly from a few countries, say maybe mostly the native English-speaking countries. And we want the model, we want to train the model under the realization that new accent variations might be seen during deployment, and the model should be robust to that. So here are some simple experiments that we did. So one of the speech to text model on the Google Cloud, when this was, by just some random guess, perhaps it was trained on 50,000 hours of data. When we applied it on US accents, we got say 13% word error rate, whereas on Indian accents, we got 22% word error rate, and Australian per accent also we got like 23% word error rate. So we don't want such huge disparity in word error rate with the switching of accents. We want our models to be more robust to accent changes. That's what we mean by domain generalization, when the domain we think of as accents. Here another totally different example. Think of say a handwriting recognition task. Say we have handwriting samples from 50 people. So these are, say, each of 50 persons has given us samples for characters. And there is, of course, variation when you go from one person to another. And we want the model to generalize to handwriting of 2 individuals. Otherwise, what's the point of training such a model, right? And so in a small in-house model, we found that such generalization is not so easy. When on the 50 people which we used for training, if we now tested the model on unseen examples from the same 50 people, we got say around 90% accuracy. But if we tested the model on 20 new people, the accuracy was only 83%. Here again, we demonstrate a lack of domain generalization for models which are trained using standard procedures of machine learning. So, oops, sorry. Yeah. So then many different methods have been proposed. So for domain generalization, this is, as I mentioned earlier, a hot area. So, so one method is what are called like domain erasure kind of methods. So before we get into those methods, first let's just sort of see again, just try to what could go wrong if you just do normal training with the domains which are present in the training data. So going back to the situation where we assume that, say, our training data comprises of these 3 different distributions, which I'm illustrating with 3 different colors. If you just train a neural network's parameters with these 3 different distributions, most likely the network will kind of overfit on these 3 distributions. I am denoting those overfitting phenomenon by just sort of coloring the parent networks with the colors of the distribution. And this is not acceptable because we want the network to do well on new colors or new distributions. So in some ways, we want the network to be color neutral. And that is what is the goal behind the domain erasure methods. So they try to train the network so that the last layer and also the classification layer, which is the softmax layer, does not retain any distribution, any group specific information, in the sense that it should be color neutral. And you achieve that through an additional loss, which is sort of this domain adversarial loss. So in addition to try to train the network to predict the correct Y given the X, you also train the network to not be able to tell the domain ID from the representative that you get at the last layer. So this is called these are called domain adversarial networks. Now, a problem with this approach, although it sounds like a very sensible way to achieve domain generalization, is that in practice, it's kind of difficult to make them work because one subtle problem is that the rest of the, these layers which produce the hidden layer H could overfit on the training domains. And another big problem is that these have very unstable training. These 2-party games, these 2 contrastive losses, they make the network training highly challenging. So here is another totally different way of trying to make your network more robust to new domains encountered, say, during deployment. And these are called data augmentation approaches. So here, the main idea is that we will use the power of neural networks to generate data to kind of hallucinate new distributions. So suppose if you have seen a red, green, and blue distributions, then through some local perturbation-based approaches, you try to come up with nearby distributions which differ from the training distributions along directions of domain change. And so now you create synthesize more distributions. So this is like a data augmentation approach, therefore. And now you train the network using the usual classifier on the union of a larger set of distributions. And now, even though these network layers continue to be colorful, but at least they understand more color, and therefore they will be sort of more generalizable. So this, how to convert this into a concrete training algorithm. Here was one approach that we had proposed in this ICLR 2018 conference. And then we evaluated it on a bunch of tasks involving handwriting recognition, speech recognition, and also character recognition from images. And we got modest gains over prevailing methods. But even then, we were not very happy with the output of those methods, because one problem, even though neural networks supposedly can generate such impressive looking fake images and videos, for general text oriented data, generating new examples is really, really challenging. So even though we were generating these hypothetical hallucinated new distributions, they were not quite useful because they had a lot of noise. So then we kind of were back to the drawing board, and we are looking for new approaches. And then this is the last of the domain adaptation approach that I'm going to present. Sorry, my computer is getting a bit slow. Okay, so this is another approach. This is again a totally different way from the previous two methods that I presented, which is the common specific decomposition based approach, or you can think of it as a factorization based approach. So what here we try to do is decompose a neural network parameters. Let's say we are just talking about the parameters in the last layer of the neural network. We decompose them into one set of parameters, which are sort of these color neutral shared parameters. And then we have these domain specific parameters, which are the specific parameters. And we combine the two sets of parameters through weights, which again are domain specific. And there are some more constraints we need to impose on these specific and shared parameters. There are these orthogonality constraints. And some more details about training, which are present in this paper, which appeared in ICML 2020. And but the magic is that you train with a network which is factorized as a sum of common components and domain specific components. But during deployment, you just throw away the specific components and only retain the common components, and it generalizes quite well. So here is just one set of experiments I'm showing on a handwriting recognition task, where on the y-axis we have gains beyond the baseline. So positive is higher is good, and different colors denote different existing methods for domain generalization. And we found that this method, the fluorescent green method, which is our method, performs sort of outperforms many other existing methods. So just to summarize the problem of domain generalization, so basically when you want to train a model which will be used by many diverse set of client distributions, you are much better off also dividing your training data into groups of distributions and applying methods which not just do example level generalization, but also group level generalization, which is what we mean by domain generalization. So that's a good idea. And the CST algorithm is, in our view, a very simple and efficient solution to the domain generalization problem. It has a very small runtime overhead compared to the baseline training methods, and it's very simple and easy to implement. Now, the topic of domain generalization is by no means solved. There are many other aspects of this problem which continue to intrigue researchers. So one recent work which we recently did, which we sort of worked on, was continuous domain generalization, where you want your model to generalize along time. So this is very common, say, in business scenarios where your data drifts slowly or continuously along time. But you want to deploy your data only, you want to deploy the trained model only, say, for a limited period of time, after which anyway you are going to retrain the model because you will have fresh training data. So how do you train a model under such a situation? Is another very interesting problem, and we have a paper in the upcoming EURIPS which targets this problem. Another problem is domain distributional robustness. Sort of this ties into fairness, about which now there is a lot of sort of concern, that how do you train a model so that it is not unfair to minority groups. So we have a paper, it's also available in arXiv on solving that task. So this brings me to the end of one part, 1/3 of my talk, actually maybe half of my talk. And I think this is a good point to stop and sort of ask questions if there are any. Maybe Vishwajit, you could perhaps see if there are any questions.
Yes, thank you, Professor Sunita, for the very nice introduction and details about ML as a service. So we have one question in the QA box. Yeah, so do we have some open data sets that clients have shared for ML-based services? If yes, like are they real time, and what was your experience like looking at that data?
So actually, we have data like named entity recognition data, and some of the data sets they have been created. Like there is a benchmark called Wildsmith benchmark, which has data sets from many different scenarios, including say like there is one data set of satellite images where say you want to identify landmarks like and also classify geographical regions, whether it's rural or urban, and maybe you have images from a bunch of countries and you want to generalize to new countries. So I would say there are like some maybe 10-15 such data sets. But if you talk about like say real clients, we are sitting in academia, so we would not have data from like real clients who might be for sending their queries to Amazon or Google or IBM. No, we don't have such data.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, so I had a question. So how much data is good enough? I mean, say we have data from say airlines domains, we have data from FCMG companies, and we have data from sports, movies, and other domains. So how much data is sufficient and good enough for like training a generalizable model which is generalizable to all domains? Or is it like more the better, like in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, so actually, it is true that if you have a very, very large number of domains, then domain generalization kind of happens implicitly. So like suppose if you had the speech recognition again example, suppose if you had say data from 10 countries, then you need to be really careful to not overfit on the 10 countries. But suppose if you had data from 500 countries, then the model would just trivially generalize to new countries. And now, but on the other hand, how much data is good enough? I mean, yes, more data is better, but on the other hand, you can also get very decent accuracy, provided you use the right and the most informative subsets of data. Ultimately, all that you care about is defining a decision boundary, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have one more question coming up here. Please elaborate more on evaluation of cloud ML. Probably he means like what exactly do you mean evaluation is different in ML services?
So actually that is coming up. Maybe we can defer this question to the
Okay.
end, because I'm going to be talking about evaluation.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we don't have any questions here, but yeah, probably like as we have talked about this, okay, we have a question here. What would be the metrics of evaluations for logistic regression? Oh, probably, yeah, this is a more like a basic question. So what would be the metrics of evaluation for logistic regression, and does it include MAE, mean absolute error, and so I think
So it depends on the task. So suppose if you are using logistic regression for a binary classification task, to tell apart panthers from dogs. So then your metric for evaluation will just be how many cases did you correctly label? But if it is a continuous problem, so suppose if you use logistic regression to output a score, like what is the probability that a customer will default? So then you might want to just look at, say, you yourself have proposed mean absolute error. Okay. So there is in fact is another of those very messy problems in machine learning. People just cannot be sure what is the correct metric to use. And the problem gets orders of magnitude harder when we talk about evaluating outputs of structured models, like how do you evaluate the quality of a translation model? So then it becomes even more subjective and challenging.
Yes, exactly. Evaluating translations is a
Yes.
bit difficult, and Blue and other metrics are not that great enough. And when
Yes.
you compare the human evaluation, they are like not that. Yeah.
Yes.
So probably we can continue the presentation now, and we can take up questions at the end of the presentation. Yeah. So over to you, Professor Sunita. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Okay. So now we are going to talk about adaptation. So in the classical machine learning setting, as I mentioned, suppose if you have a little bit of labeled data for your client distribution into a new domain, which was not covered in the training data, you could just run a few more loops of the training algorithm, which is what we call fine tuning. And most of the time it works out quite okay. But this default practice is not an option in the cloud setting, because we assume that the model parameters are not visible to the client. So, and also we don't want to do adaptation on the server side. And that brings us to the topic of black box adaptation. So here we are going to consider in this domain adaptation setting, where we are given a trained model on a large data set T, and we have a small amount of labeled data L in a target domain Q. And the labeled data that is available is not large enough so that we can just train a model from scratch on the target distribution. So what we want to do is fuse the model, this mega model, the service model theta, with the limited labeled data, but more relevant data from the target domain Q. And when we talk about black box adaptation, we have to do this adaptation without having access to the training data, which was used for training the theta, and also where we cannot update theta. So in general, solving this problem can be very challenging, but we did this fun exercise on black box adaptation of automatic speech recognition model for accented speech. So this was joint work with a bunch of co-authors in IIT Bombay. So here is the setup. We have the client. In our case, it was like the client was like accent English, Indian speakers of English. So, we have supposedly some accent when we speak. So we have a limited amount of label data of the target accent. And the service is maybe not trained well enough on that accent, but overall it's better because it has seen more diverse training data, it is more noise tolerant, so on and so forth. And the service is proprietary and a black box, and we cannot fine tune to adapt to the target accent. So pictorially, this is the setup that we are considering. So we have this server model, which has been trained, let's say, on huge amounts of data, just putting up a number, 50,000 hours of speech recognition data, and you get this service ASR model. And in our case, we were working with Google Cloud service of speech to text using their speech to text API. And our client consisted of this bunch of, say, 37 hours of audio of Indian accented speakers. And what we did was we took an open source ASR model. At that time, it was Deep Speech 2. That was the state-of-the-art model, which was already trained on some open source LibriSpeech 100 hours of data. And we fine-tuned that on the Indian accented data. And we call that the local ASR model. And this local ASR model is a white box. We have full access to the data and the model parameters here. And the service ASR is just a black box, which we can only access by providing to it an audio and getting back the text transcript. Now, when we tested it on a sample of Indian accented speech, we found that the local model still is much worse than the service model. It gives us a 28% WER, whereas the service just gives us 22% WER. But what we will show is that it is possible to fuse the two models in such a way that you can do better than both. That is what I'm going to show in the rest of the talk. So one possible way to fuse the outputs of these two models, which is an established method in the speech community, is alignment. So suppose if you have an input audio signal X, you feed it to both the local ASR model and to the service ASR model, and each of them will give you a transcript which we are denoting as C. For example, if there is some audio, the local ASR model might give the transcript as this. Everyone to state some random words it has recognized, and it also gives a probability attached which denotes its confidence with this decoding it has done. So everyone has probability 0.92, so on and so forth. Likewise, from the service also, you get a small variant of the audio as the decoding. And so the first word they have agreed on, but the rest is not the same. Okay, last word is also the same. And there is probabilities attached with this decoding. Now you take these two outputs, confidence weighted sequence of words, and you fuse them. There are well-known libraries for such fusion. We used Rover, it's some well-established library. And this sort of merges two probability weighted sequences, and the merged output we get is something like everyone to posted the. Now this is actually wrong, because the gold in this case was actually everyone toasted the. And you see that the service has not gotten the T correctly, because we all know that there are some words that Indian speakers speak systematically differently from, say, American speakers. Like we would not say toasted, we would say toasted, right? So it just does not understand our way of saying ter. So, so this is the scenario that we are in. So the local ASR model is expected to be good only on some parts of the audio which denote the accent bias. Now, not all words and not all phonemes have an accent bias, only a subset of them do. Whereas largely the service model is much better. You know, it is more noise tolerant, it has a stronger language model. So if we just do word level matching, we cannot go very far, because the problems could just be that we have not rolled our R's enough or not aspirated the P's enough. And those give rise to systematic character level or phoneme level errors, and we have to intervene at a finer level than just the word level alignment that the previous method was doing. Now, we also tried character level merging. One problem was that the service was not giving us character level confidences, but we still went ahead and converted the word level confidences to character level confidences and did the merge. And we did slightly better, but not so great. So then we came up with more sort of kind of a deeper integration of a services output with a client model. And the key idea there in this new method, which we call find merge, is that we exploit white box access to the local model. So because I mentioned white box more access, now we have to go and look a bit into the sort of the details of an automatic speech recognition model to understand what we did. So first, so typically, I'm considering the standard CTC kind of model. So we have this raw audio, we pass it through a CTC network. And what that model gives us is for each audio frame, it gives us a probability distribution over the characters that it has recognized in that frame. So you can think of this grid, each on this side you have characters. So let's assume that you have just 5 characters. So this gives you a probability distribution over characters. And on the rows here, you have time. And these character distributions are then fused with a language model to output the transcript. This is how a traditional ASR model, one of the traditional ASR model works. So what we propose is to intervene with the service output at this layer. So these frame level character distributions that we obtained, Q1 through Qt, we inject at this layer the output from the service, and we do the rest of the decoding with the revised character level distributions. How we do that? Again, I will not be able to go into too much detail, but the main idea is as follows. So we take the input, we pass it through the local ASR model, but now from the local ASR model, we don't get the full transcript. We just get the character level distribution at the for each frame. And then from the service, anyway, we only have the transcript and word level confidences. So then we merge the transcript from the server with the character distribution. There is some alignment step that we do, and then we revise the character level distribution. And after that, we do the beam decoding, and it does the right thing. In the end, we sort of, here are some numbers. So we did these experiments on 2 accents, Indian accent and Australian accent. And these are 3 different service models. Is Google's US model, Google's video model, and Jasper models. And for each of these, for the Indian accent, if we just look at the word error rate from the local model was 28, and for Australian accent it was 24, and the service of course was much better. For all 3 service models were better, except, sorry, the Jasper model were better than the local model. But when we applied this fine merge intervention, we obtained lower word error rate than both the service model and of course the local model. So this is what is shown here. Okay, so here are some examples. I have already been giving a sort of a example of this toasted the, everyone toasted the, and the service produced everyone posted the, local model produced everyone to state the, and we were able to do this fine-grained merging at a frame level to get the correct output. Here is another example which comes around because most Indian speakers do not roll the R enough. We do not roll our R's, and so the service model cannot hear the R. So for a brief time, so it just did not hear the R, whereas the local model hears the R, but it has a few other mistakes, and we fuse the 2 and we get the correct. So in summary, black box adaptation is, in this case, it was of course task specific. We gave an algorithm for black box adaptation of a ASR model for accent adaptation, and we were able to achieve a significant reduction in word error rate. And it helps us, our method helps recover words that were present in neither the black box service nor the local ASR because we did fine-grained merging. So now this was one instance of black box adaptation. Now you can think about whether such black box adaptation makes sense for other tasks, for example, translation or even some of the vision tasks. So this is, I guess, left as an exercise for the audience. And now I'm going to go to the third of the ML pipelines, which is evaluation. So in classical ML, we are sort of so used to just reporting a single number to denote the performance of a trained model. And here I'm going to motivate why that will not suffice. So even, I had shown this slide at the beginning of the talk where I was comparing different classifier models just based on one error rate value over this entire data set, which was the ImageNet data set. Even for speech recognition, I was just reporting a single word error rate averaged over the entire test data. Now, such a number to evaluate classifiers can be highly misleading and very inadequate in the service setting. And it's not very surprising that here say we if you look beyond the average, if you consider subsets of data, then you can see huge difference in the accuracy for different subsets of data. So this plot is showing that. So we had a gender classification service. So given somebody's image of a face, it can classify that face as being male or female. And we had a service model, and it gave us 92% accuracy overall over all the images. But when we looked at the accuracy for various clients, then the accuracy values ranged all the way from 10% for some of the the worst clients to perfect recognition for some of the more mainstream blessed clients, let's say. So now, given this huge diversity in the accuracy of different distributions of data, now there is this question of, a client cannot just rely on the published accuracy of a trained model on one benchmark data set to decide whether that service is a good fit for their needs. So another challenge that the client has typically is that clients do not have enough label data. Even if they had label data, before they invest time and coding effort in evaluating their models or their data on one of the services, they would first like to get a rough idea of how good the service is going to be on their data. And this becomes even more challenging when you do not have label data. So given these challenges, so we proposed a sort of two-step methodology. So first we are proposing is that we should involve domain experts to identify sort of attributes which are interpretable and which can be used to define different client distributions. So these would be chosen manually, and it would certainly be task specific. For example, if we are talking about a speech recognition model, then the attributes could be something like the background in which the speech is recorded, the accent of the speaker, the emotion in the speech, and the input device. And now different clients might have different subsets of values for these attributes. Say a coffee shop in India, when that client tries to use the ASR service, they can recognize themselves as being somebody who mostly operate in noisy setting with an Indian accent and using a telephone as the input device. Whereas a conference room can say that, look, I am mostly interested in speech recognition performance when the background is quiet and there is sort of people are speaking without much emotion, and the input device is a hi-fi microphone. So for these different settings, suppose if the server could report accuracy, then it becomes very easy for clients to choose the correct service. Here is another example, say for face recognition, the attributes could be something like the predominant skin color, the head cover, the brightness in which most of the images will be taken, the resolution, so on and so forth. So the second step after one has recognized these defining attributes would be for the server to publish a table which we are calling actually as a service, as a surface or a function that, given a combination of values of these attributes, will give you back an accuracy number. And since this number of combinations can be very large, you may not be able to kind of instantiate this accuracy surface as an explicitly materialized table, but rather as a function. I mean, there are many ways to do it that we are not getting into right now. So, so this is thus, for the second problem itself is kind of very challenging. How do you come up with such accuracy surface? Because the number of attribute combinations can be very large. And also, even for servers which have a huge amount of labeled data, there will exist ARM combinations where the amount of labeled data will be limited. And those are the minority ARMs. And we might need to involve a human to collect more labeled data for this sort of sparsely populated ARM combinations. So there is also for the evaluation a bit of exploration required, where you engage a human to collect more labeled data specifically for the purpose of evaluating a trained model. So these are some of the challenges that come up in this problem. And I will not go maybe into details of how we solve this problem. Instead, I would encourage you to look at this paper that we have in the upcoming NeurIPS 2021, where we talk about active assessment of prediction services, prediction services as accuracy surface over attribute combinations. So basically, just a quick summary of the evaluation part. What we are saying is that ML services need to report accuracy as a surface over interpretable descriptors of data distribution. And there is this challenge of how to estimate then the service efficiently using limited label data. And in the paper, we talk about how Gaussian processes can be used to share parameters across different ARM combinations while simultaneously modeling the uncertainty of the estimate for each ARM so that you can explore better. So that brings me to the end of my talk. What basically I try to motivate is that when we go from classical ML, where training and deployment is within the boundaries of one organization, to the cloud ML setting, where one large organization is training these mega models to be used by maybe millions of diverse clients, then you want to train your data set in terms by explicitly thinking of your data set as a mixture of various groups, and you want to generalize to new groups, you want to be fair to minority groups. When you want to adapt, since you do not have access to the training data, what are on the fly quick adaptation techniques that you can apply? We presented one instance of it for the ASR model. And even evaluation cannot be simplistic in the form of just reporting one number on a fixed benchmark, but rather accuracy accuracy should be reported as a surface, and this itself is a challenging problem. So in future, I think for adaptation, a lot more work is required, for on-the-fly adaptation. Currently we are working on how to do on-the-fly adaptation using unlabeled data alone. But in general, I feel this is a very exciting area, and we have only scratched the surface, and a lot of fresh thinking is needed to redesign training, adaptation, and evaluation pipelines so as a single service model can keep a diverse set of clients happy. Thank you all.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Sunita, for the insightful and interesting talk. So yeah, we have some questions here on the QA box. One is any favorable attribute from like when you consider Indian languages and Western languages do you used in these applications, or like adding to that, my question is also that why ASR is not that great for Indian languages as such? Is it the data, or is it the difference between Western accent and Indian accent?
So it's both the
So
difference in accent.
Go into
Yeah.
some details.
Yeah. So first, why is the ASR model? So I think there are two different questions. So maybe first I will look at the question of what are the attributes for language, like text data. So maybe for text data, attributes could be like, suppose if you are trying to use a translation model, then attributes could be along, say, topics, like whether it's about medical or legal or travel domain, That could be one of the attributes. The other attribute could be the grammatical complexity of the sentences. Like even textbooks have different reading levels. So, the grade level of the sentences which are being translated. That could be a second. Some easy attributes could just be the length of a sentence. How many clauses are there in the sentence. So things like that, that those could be used for language. So Vishwajit's question about why is it that the mainstream ASR models are not so great for Indian accent? I guess, there are two reasons. Of course, so this is something we have spent a lot of time trying to understand. And as it happens for, I guess you also know very well, for the speech and language models, there is often no one single crisp answer. So yes, partly the reason is that there are a few systematic differences in the way we, pronounce certain syllables, like particularly the P's and the R's and things like that. But also the second difference is the speed at which we speak. Right? I mean, the amount of interword gap that we provide. That's the second one. And I think that, these are the two main things. And if you, of course, trained with lots of Indian data, it will, of course, work well. But we just, these models do not have enough samples from Indian speakers. Another interesting phenomenon that we have observed is that, so even if an organization has, let's say, let's consider 50,000 hours of ASR data, let's say which one of these big companies have. And even if, let's say, 1/10 of the data is collected by Indian accented speakers, the fact that 90% of the data is not of the mainstream accent would make the model worse for these 10% users also. If you are not mindful of being fair to those 10% users. And that's why now there is a lot of research in the ML community on distributional robustness. So if you could recognize groups in your training data, could you make your model fair to each of the groups?
Thank you. So, rather general or subjective question. So, can you elaborate a bit on future growth in the ML, like where we are heading towards now?
Yeah, I mean, I just, of course, as machine learning gets much more and more embedded in our day-to-day life, we will now have to solve the hard niche, the hard problems of basically kind of making sure that we are flexible, we adapt to change, we are accountable, we are transparent. So the fairness and all those things will become very, very tricky. And we need to kind of have, I think, reliability and guarantees. Those will become very important. You cannot sort of just say, okay, this is what I got. Right? I mean, you have to sort of provide, and that is also partly what we try to do in the evaluation by providing the surface. That's also going a bit towards the direction of, sort of being very precise about what the service offers. Like in software, you have detailed specification and you have to follow those specifications. Even if machine learning models are stochastic, but as they get entrenched in critical applications, they have to also provide guarantees.
Yeah, and also I would like to add to this point that it is moving towards more interpretable ML or interpretable AI. Like now we have black box models that is very hard to interpret, right? Like one example you gave in your slides, service versus local models, right? And
Yes.
when you merge them, you get a better performance. So it means that definitely the service model and the local model is not doing the same mistakes, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, one probably a basic question: how does one select the attributes and assess the efficacy of attribute selection method used?
Okay, that's a good question. And I don't think one can kind of provide a recipe. But in general, suppose if I were to automatically select attributes from a large set that has been provided by a user, I would prefer attributes which are discriminating on the accuracy, right? So if you want to select attributes where the services performance varies, so that is one yardstick that you can use. Um, and apart from that, you have to just follow the subjective measures of whether those attributes can characterize most of the client distributions, and whether a client can sort of place themselves in this grid of attributes.
Sure.
Yeah.
So there is again one more question about accent. So the question is: there is no single Indian accent; it is regional.
Yeah. That's
How do
actually
you
very interesting. Yeah.
how do you attempt to solve this problem, and what are like possible
Yeah.
directions you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
take?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And in fact, we had some other follow-up work where we tried to kind of go from country level to state level. And it was just shocking to see the diversity of word error rates. Like for some speakers from the Northeast, we had word error rate as high as 43%. Whereas for, like, say, a speaker from Delhi, we had like a very low word error rate of maybe 10% WER. Whereas, we were looking in particular at, say, Assamese females, for example. They had a very high word error rate. It also differs from based on gender. Yeah.
Yeah. So the question basically is like, how do you aim to solve this, and what are like possible directions you have in mind to solve this problem of multiple accents in India? Like, is it that creating more data for different accent, or like any other technique?
I guess, see, even if, so there are multiple layers to this. So to start with, a model should generalize to new accents as much as it can. So that is the robustness of the service. But in spite of that robustness, you will provide differential results on different accents. And then there is no substitute to collecting more labeled data. And now the question becomes, how do you efficiently collect labeled data to adapt to new accents? So that is one dimension, and there is work on that, including some work we have in Interspeech or ICASP, one of the conferences. We have a paper where we talk about how to efficiently collect labeled data to adapt to new sort of specific accents, and that's where we studied the state-specific variation of accent. That is one thing one can do. And second thing is maybe you can latch on to similar accents. So can we make our models, instead of being like a neutral, the opposite to generalizable models would be customizable models. Can we like allow for quick customization? So can you turn knobs very easily so that you can customize to different sections of the distribution in a sort of both interpretable and sort of an effective way. Like suppose if a client is going to spend the effort to teach a server the right controls on their data, then the client should get some returns out of it. So how do you achieve that? These are all interesting research problems. Some of these we are trying to solve in our lab even right now. Yeah.
Great. So again, we have a general question. So being a pioneer in AI in India, so how do you see AI in India versus AI in global world? Like, how do you see?
Oh, actually, it's really sad. We are nowhere. I mean, I just feel that We are just followers, you know. In fact, it's not so much India versus the rest of the world. It's academia versus the few large organizations, because AI is so data driven. You know, most of the cutting edge work in machine learning and AI has come from the few large labs which are endowed with huge amounts of data. So there is absolutely no comparison. You know, some of us have major existential crisis about our research impact compared to what some of these large organizations, let their name not be said aloud, achieve. Yeah, it's very pessimistic.
Sure.
I will not try to give false hope. I mean, we are just nowhere.
Sure. Yeah, great. So one more question is here. The question is like in the cases where you have access to, like, say, restricted like domains. Say for example, you have bank data or domain or the domains where you can't reveal all the data, you can't reveal personal details. So how do you apply or how do you train a model and evaluate in that data? So probably like data security and other things.
Yeah. This is another very important area that I did not get into. Yes, yeah. So, you know, how to even deploy a model in a privacy preserving way. Suppose if I want to use a translation model, a translation service, but I want to translate some really top secret text. How can I use it without revealing my text? These are very interesting problems. And in fact, on some of these, there is ongoing research. It's not something which is within my current horizon. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So there is another question, rather a more hypothetical question. So, any tips and suggestions for training a model with zero or lower error rate, probably word error rate or something? So the question says, do you have suggestion or tips to train and build a ML model with zero or lower error rate?
So you cannot, the only way you can do that is to strictly control what you deploy your model on. Yeah.
Sure.
So if you give your model, so one of the most important things is to be able to withdraw the use of a model when when it sort of goes outside the training distribution. So unless you do that, the question will not, it will never materialize.
Yeah.
So you have to, that is one of the, and in fact it sounds very simple, but for a model to reject examples saying that, look, I don't know anything about this example, so don't use my prediction on this. So unless you can say that, it's very difficult to achieve close to perfect accuracy.
Okay, so now we have a question. What are your suggestions, or probably what India needs to do to be on the on par with the global development in AI on global platform, or like the development which is happening in across the world? Like what
I
India
think we
needs?
should, first I think we need to start with primary schools. We need to have better primary schools, and then maybe 20 years down the road we can think about this thing. I just feel like the problems are really at a grassroots level. But sorry, that was maybe a bit far off, but I think if we were to think of immediate things that we can do to sort of invest in AI, one of the big things is we have to be more disciplined about collecting data. Without data you cannot have AI, and we have to know very clearly our deployment scenarios. I feel that research can only be driven by concrete applications. So we have to kind of very clearly define our deployment scenarios and be disciplined about collecting data And then, I think currently, the technology exists. With deep learning now, there are many, many models and training algorithms, and all you need to do is just collect the data.
Yeah,
No,
sure.
yeah, I don't think right now research is the bottleneck.
Great. Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
So thank you, Professor Sunita, for answering all the tough questions. I would like to now hand it over to Dr. Sushila.
Thanks, Vishwajit.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Today was so exciting. I think it was an eye-opener for a lot of us in terms of the kind of research that is actually going on that we do not hear about. So this was I think an amazing session, even though I personally don't work, technically in the area of AI, but nevertheless, it was really, really a very interesting session. Thank you for that. And Dr. Vishwajit, thank you for anchoring today's session, for so readily agreeing to be part of today's session. So just a few summary points from today. We started by talking about deep learning and the fact that neural networks were too unstable, very slow and hard to train until about the year 2010. Which was when smart optimizers and a number of engineering methods resulted in making object classification in images, for example, so much better. And came a time when in 2015, deep learning surpassed human accuracy with respect to speech recognition, object classification, but speech recognition, the neural model actually improved was better than humans in the year 2017. And then grammar error corrections was another breakthrough in 2019. So the point that Dr. Sunita made was that as the larger models started to come in, and obviously there was a lot more data, which is really the reason for the improvement in these models. But what happened then was that training these machine learning models just became so resource intensive that only a few organizations with rather deep pockets could afford to run those models. And therefore, the idea of machine learning as a service became very important and became something that would allow a number of people to be able to run these models on the cloud. But of course, the organizations that we all know who run these clouds. And then the question that arises is that these organizations train the data based on a large set, but it's generalized data. And how accurate is that for a specific client instance? So right along the machine learning pipeline, training, adaptation, and evaluation, Dr. Sunita picked up each area and then went deeper into what the issues were and what could be done through the work that has been done by her and her colleagues at IIT Bombay. And so she talked about domain generalization, the various issues that are involved. She talked about domain erasure issues, data augmentation, and I like the term hallucination very much. That was a new one for me. But also common specific decompositions based approaches. And while the generic model worked pretty well, there were still a lot of issues. And then later on, we looked at what could be done about it. And then the question of adaptation and fine tuning. In the classic ML models, you would typically fine tune to adapt parameters to the new setup. Whereas in the cloud, it would typically be a black box adaptation model that is not known to the client, and therefore, then we saw examples with respect to Indian accent, and and then the word error rates of 28%, 22% for whether it was the classic model or the server-based model. But by fusing the two approaches, and this is the path-breaking work that's been done by this team, and by fusing the error, the work error rate could be reduced substantially. And this deeper approach, which is called fine merge, allows for a white box access to a local model. And then she talked us through what the fine merge algorithm is all about, and how by that this model could actually show improvements of over 30%, of almost 30% over both the local and server-based model. So it's congratulations for doing something so path-breaking. She then went on to talk about look at the issue of evaluation, and then talked about accuracy as a surface over interpretable descriptors of data distributions rather than a single chunk. So the conclusion after all of that was that just because there is a machine learning as a service on the cloud available, a client can't really decide if that is specifically the right one for them or not, for various reasons. So starting with the domain experts who would identify what the attributes really ought to be, and then looking at an accuracy surface as the methodology to really evaluate what it's all about. So this is a very exciting field, lots and lots happening, many problems still opening. And for those who are have a career or looking at a career in this space, I'm sure this has been very inspirational. And then talking about tricky issues like fairness, which at a level are not purely technical. There's something deeper than that needs to be also addressed. But these are all problems that are still there. And I'm certain that this would have this session would really excite a lot of people who are taking up or considering careers or looking at what next do I do with this space. In terms of, I think there were wonderful questions, really interesting questions from the audience. Thank you for that, because that also helps make our webinar that much more interesting and engaging. The IIT Alumni Center Bengaluru, that's us, we are planning a Center of Excellence in AI. And we certainly hope we can work with you, Dr. Saravagi, and Vishwajit, as well as with many people who are going to be on this webinar and who are going to watch this webinar, to help that last discussion that we had about what does India need to do to become a force to reckon with, even if I don't call it leadership, at least a force to reckon with on the global stage. And we hope that we can become the sort of glue that will pull everyone together to make that really happen. So with that, all that remains is for me to say thank you. This, as I said, this has been so interesting and an eye-opener. And Vishwajit, thank you very much to our audience. Thank you for being here and making this another very successful and interesting session. All of our webinars are on the IIT SCB YouTube channel. This one will go up on our channel again by Monday. You should see it there. Please feel free to look as many times as you like, and also please share the word around. With that, thank you very much and goodbye.